Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Lore of Gilmore podcast. We're gonna dive deep into the world of Gilmore Girls, one of my favorite shows, so I've watched it a fair amount of times. I'm your host, Kenzie Mangum, and in today's episode, we're gonna talk all about conflict. Something that the Gilmores are pros at navigating, and sometimes not navigating so well, depending on the day, how they're feeling. But we're going to be focusing specifically on mother-daughter dynamic relationships between Lorelai and Emily, Lorelai and Rory, and then Rory and Emily, and break down how their conflicts shape their relationships. Spoiler alert, there is a lot to unpack. So let's dive in. Conflict isn't just a tool for drama. It's a way of exploring deeper truths about relationships in Gilmore Girls. It's central to the show's storytelling, especially between Lorelai and her mother, Emily, and Lorelai and Rory. These relationships are complex, multi-layered, and packed with history, because they're families. They obviously have that, making their conflicts both fascinating and relatable to most of us. At least me. Today, I've chosen a few key episodes that highlight different aspects of conflict. One is power dynamics, conflict styles, perceptions of conflict, forgiveness, and bullying. Each one of these sheds light on how these characters communicate, or fail to communicate, with what's said about their own relationships. The first topic we're gonna speak about is power and conflict. Such a fun one. Gotta start with a bang. For this, I looked at the season 1 episode, Forgiveness and Stuff. This is a Christmas episode, holidays, lots of conflict, where Lorelai and Emily clash over their expectations and unspoken frustrations, all while Richard is in the hospital from a minor heart attack. But he's okay. He makes it all 7 seasons. I also did some academic research for this, so this is the first key point. It says that it's the Journal of Elder Abuse and Neglect, and it goes into power imbalances between mothers and daughters by surveying these daughters on various different things of how they thought their mother did and everything like that. But this section in particular stuck out to me. It says, daughters expressed that the power positions mothers held had not disappeared as the daughters grew older. They were less dependent on their mothers for instrumental support. In adulthood, daughters felt their aging mothers still held power over them to influence their decisions and behaviors, and their mothers could still invoke these feelings of powerlessness. And these participants described how their present day-to-day relationships with their mother could successfully order them to do something else, like clean, visit a relative, and their mother could make these unilateral decisions in their relationship to get them to where she wants them to go. So here's the dynamic in this case. Emily often assumes authority in her relationship with Lorelai. She's her mom. It comes with the position. But it tends to be about Friday night dinners, Rory's schooling, like we're Chilton, or if she decides Yale or Harvard, and even family traditions. In this case, in this episode, she was disinvited to their family dinner Christmas party thing, and it was so hard for her because she always loved that. But on the other hand, Lorelai constantly pushes back against Emily's control to sort of create this power imbalance and power struggle. This episode, we see Emily wielding her power through subtle guilt trips and her sense of propriety, while Lorelai challenges her mother by refusing to conform to Emily's idea of what a good daughter should be. What's interesting is how this power dynamic creates both distance and connection for them, really. Emily's control comes from a place of love, but it's expressed in ways that sort of push Lorelai away because she doesn't need that constant nagging, kind of. But by the end of the episode, through tiny little glimpses, we're able to see vulnerability from both of the women as an acknowledgement that their power struggles are rooted in their shared desire to care for one another, as most mothers and daughters have. The next conflict idea we're going to start talking about is conflict styles, which is always a fun one. I just learned about these and I had a blast learning about them. But these specifically are front and center in the season 4 episode Raincoats and Recipes. This episode is where Rory and Lorelai have a big blow up about Rory's budding relationship with Dean. Dean is married. Dean got married and without her, and they have started to get a little bit closer, which isn't always the best thing, but hey, it leads to this. So it plays out with Lorelai being direct and confrontational. She dives right into the conflict and is like, Rory, this is not right. You cannot be doing this to Dean's wife. Rory, however, tends to avoid confrontation, only engaging when she feels cornered and coerced, kind of. And these contrasting styles create this tension that spirals, leaving both of them feeling very frustrated and unheard, which is clearly not the best thing to hear and be having. In another study from China Medical Media Research, they looked at a few things and said the purpose of this study was to examine the ways intergenerational effects of mothers' conflict styles on their daughters through the eyes of the daughters across 3 generations, i.e. grandmother, mother, daughter. So Emily, Lorelai, Rory. 4 major findings were reported. First is that mothers' perceived use of integrating, compromising, obliging styles had a positive relationship, whereas mothers' use of competing styles had a negative relationship with the mother-daughter relational closeness and satisfaction. Second, mothers' perceptions of their mothers' use of compromising, obliging, and competing styles had a linear relationship with their daughters' perceptions of their mothers. But mothers' perceptions of their own mothers, grandmothers, use of integrating and avoiding had neither a linear or curvilinear relationship with their daughters' perceptions of their mothers. Third is that daughters reported a closer, more satisfied relationship with their mothers than their mothers did with their mothers. So that would be Rory's relationship with Lorelai and how sort of strained Lorelai's relationship with Emily is. But last, the daughters' perceptions of their mother's conflict styles were more integrating, compromising, and obliging than their mother's perceptions of their own mothers. But the difference between these mother and daughter perceptions of their mothers, so the grandmother, use of competing and avoiding styles were not significant, which is very interesting if you think about it. This episode highlights a common issue in family conflicts. When people approach disagreements with these different styles, these different conflict styles, it can feel like they're speaking entirely different languages, which happened in Lorelai's case. Lorelai wanted to resolve things immediately. She has that close relationship with Rory. They love each other. But Rory wanted to escape and process these emotions in her own time. So she avoided the conflict and ran away. But Lorelai tried to come in and collaborate and find a way to get through this conflict. Neither approach is inherently wrong, but they do clash in ways that escalate the tension. It's a reminder that understanding how someone handles conflict can be just as important as conflict itself, kind of. The next conflict topic we're going to talk about is perceptions in conflict. So let's explore through the season 6 episode of the titled The Prodigal Daughter Returning. This is an episode where Rory moves back home after dropping out of Yale, which comes with Jess's famous line, "Why did you drop out of Yale?" But it's okay. We're mid with Rory right now. My emotions, we'll set them aside. But Lorelai has this tense reunion with Emily in a plane that she's trying to buy because Rory decides to come home and live with Lorelai again instead of Emily. Here is another research journal titled Conflict Management in Mother-Daughter Interactions in Early Adolescence. It says that development changes in conflict management suggests the use of specific conflict management style behaviors and might be related to the perceptions of different aspects of these relationships. Previous research has shown that the adolescents who report using conflict management characterized by attack and display of anger or withdrawal report lower relationship quality. What's satisfying here is how each character perceives the relationship differently and perceives the situation differently. Emily comes at it with she just starts fighting with Lorelai. She's like, what did I do wrong? Like, I don't want Rory to be just like you. She was our precious child, and she ran away because of that same nagging style that I kind of said earlier, how it drove away Lorelai. But Emily, in that situation, sees herself as the hero. She stepped in to support Rory when Lorelai wouldn't, when she dropped out of Yale. She gave her a home to live in, she gave her food, she gave her a nice life. Lorelai, however, doesn't see Emily's actions as the same way. She sees them as a sort of betrayal because she went to them first when this was happening and said, "Hey, Rory's gonna drop out of Yale. Can you help us? Can you help me make sure she doesn't drop out of Yale, make sure she stays in school?" But they just didn't do it. So Rory was caught in the middle, perceiving both of them as overbearing in different ways, of Lorelai wanting her to stay at school and Emily just being herself, the queen she is. This episode shows how miscommunications and assumptions sort of often fuel conflict. Emily's good intentions are completely lost on Lorelai. Those insecurities and past experiences color her interpretations of these events. And it's a powerful reminder that perception shapes reality in conflict, often more than actual facts itself. The next section we'll talk about is the practice of forgiveness and reconciliation, which is central to the episode in season 2 titled Secrets and Loans. We're going to start right off in a book that's titled The Communicative Approach to Conflict, Forgiveness, and Reconciliation. It talks about how reimagining these relationships through forgiveness really helps, and it says that interpersonal perspectives on forgiveness emphasize social aspects of this process. And the social nature of forgiveness is most comprehensive to think of forgiveness as a psychological construct rather than an intra-individual pro-social change towards the transgressor or person that you're forgiving. And it's in this situation that there's a specific interpersonal context that they must think through. These models emphasize, process, and kind of uncover one's emotional response to a transgression and gain insight into understanding and recognizing these decisional aspects of forgiveness. In this episode that we're talking about, Secrets and Loans, Lorelai and Emily experience one of their many breakdowns over the years. Lorelai and Rory's house has termites, and she doesn't have enough money to fix it. So Rory and Rory and Lorelai have a conversation that she will not go to her parents again. She doesn't need their help. She doesn't want their help. But Rory, being the kind of kid she is, goes to Emily and asks for help in the form of money, just like Lorelai didn't want her to. They've always had this sort of complicated relationship, but here they go through a moment of raw vulnerability when they're sitting in a bank. Well, it's outside of the bank that Emily gets the interview for Lorelai from. Emily struggles to understand why Lorelai rejects her help and finds it hard to forgive Emily for never fully accepting her life choices in life of running away with Rory to be a maid, but now she's the manager of the inn, so she has a okay life. But by the end of the episode, there is a brief, but I would argue significant moment of reconciliation where Emily apologizes. That doesn't happen very often. And Lorelai, though still a little hesitant, acknowledges her mother's efforts. What's beautiful, I think, about this scene is that it shows how challenging forgiveness can be in families in cases where they both, cuts have run so deep, especially when it hurts and it's not over yet because you haven't been able to process it, even though it happened years ago. But it also demonstrates that reconciliation isn't always about sweeping things under the rug. It's about recognizing the need for healing, even if it's messy. The Gilmores don't suddenly become best friends. They don't after this, but it marks a crucial step towards a more understanding relationship. The last section we'll tackle is about bullying and emotional conflict. This comes up in season 2, the episode titled Nick and Nancy, Sid and Nora. In this episode, Rory faces bullying from a peer at Chilton who teases her for her kind of unconventional lifestyle compared to the typical rich elite students. This may not come as a shocker, but it could have been Paris. She lied to Rory about the time that the Franklin, the newspaper at Chilton, staff meeting starts. And because she didn't like her because of whatever his name is, because she's in love with him. But Rory had a little moment with him. But whatever. Lorelai, who has always encouraged Rory to be herself and reject these social pressures, finds herself in this tricky situation when she realizes that Rory is being hurt by this bully, hurt by Paris, because of the Franklin newspaper where she's the head of, the editor, and Rory's just one of the writers. This conflict arises when Lorelai tries to push back against the social dynamics at play, but Rory feels kind of embarrassed and isolated being at Chilton and just really wants to blend in. In a study done by the British Journal of Educational Psychology titled Bullying and Victimization at School, the role of mothers, it states that a responsive mother is available to talk to her children and help them deal with problems arising in the day. She is accepting, dependable, and perceived by her children as supportive. Having a responsive but not overprotective mother has a positive effect on her children. The most obvious of these effects is a better adaptation at school, including achievement in and social adjustment. Further, a child who is socially accepted and included in class or school activities is less likely to exhibit aggressive behavior. This goes along with this episode because it highlights how bullying isn't always these overt actions, kind of. But it's also the subtle ways that people sort of feel pressure to conform, which leads to an internal conflict. The emotional toll of it is trying to fit in an image you don't identify with is something that Rory really grapples with here. And it's powerful is how Lorelai, despite her tendency to push these boundaries, ultimately understands her daughter's need to navigate the social environment in her way. This is an episode that shows how her emotional support and understanding can play a vital role in resolving conflict, especially in dealing with external pressures like bullying. Now we'll do a quick little wrap up with a few little insights and takeaways we can learn from all these different conflicts across these episodes as we see these patterns that come up. The first is power struggles. They often stem from love sometimes, but especially in families, but they create distance, as clearly seen with Lorelai and Emily. Conflict styles highlight the importance of communication and patience. Perceptions in conflict are deeply influenced by personal experiences and biases. Forgiveness, it's messy, but it's also can be super necessary for healing, just like with Emily and Lorelai. Bullying and emotional conflict reveal the pain of trying to fit into a world that doesn't understand you. The Chilton world doesn't understand Rory because she lives in Stars Hollow and she's not rich, just like the rest of them. But at the heart of it all, these conflicts aren't just about hurt feelings or misunderstandings. They're about love. Families love each other, but they also fight. The Gilmores fight because they care, even if they have a funny way of showing it sometimes. Well, that's it for today's episode. It's a little bit long, but it's okay. That's it for the Lore of Gilmore. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the Gilmore's family dynamics. Thanks for listening, and remember, life short, talk fast. Famous Lorelai quote. Have a good one.